have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how do you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast.
Hello and welcome back to the ViperCast presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. This is officially episode 171 or season 3, episode 2 of Behind the Grind. And as always, I am joined by Major Caldwell and Tera Roberts, but our guest this week, you can catch him on Jaguars Today. He's also the Gameday host on Jaguars Radio, as well as the host on Football Diehards on Sirius XM Fantasy Radio. He is the one and only Mike Dempsey. How you doing, Mike?
I'm well, and good for all of your audience that there's only one of me. Trust me.
The one and only. That's where we got to go with that. So we'll talk about this here in a little bit later because I heard someone say that you're very competitive. So if there was 2 Mike Dempseys out there, what would happen?
There may have been at one point, but I'm not going to talk about that because that guy lost. Honestly, I don't know. Neither one of us would get any sleep. I consider myself a very competitive person. I'm guessing you heard that from Bob Harris.
I cannot confirm or deny that it was Bob Harris.
Yes. No, I am, and I'm very, very happy to put my record up against anybody, and I don't claim to be the best, but I also am not going to automatically put myself behind anybody when it comes to fantasy football. So I think we're all that way to some degree, right? I mean, we get into this, we're competitive, we want to win, we want to be the best.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because you've managed to drag myself and Tera both into these best ball challenges right now. And at least some of us haven't auto picked yet, while some of us may have already made an auto pick a time or two. So how many best balls are you in right now?
Just got 7 going right now, but honestly, I probably started like 12 days ago, I think, for my first one. So, and Tera knows because Tera plays in a bunch of these. I'm sure you guys do as well, that once you open the seal on the first one, it's over. Like then you're jonesing. Like, all right, I had the 3rd pick. Now what? I got to wait 20 picks or however long it takes to get back to me. So I got an idea. Why don't I start a new one? And maybe I'll have an early pick in that one, and I won't have to wait around. Oh, I got a late pick in that one. I'll start another one, and that's just kind of how I am. So I might get up to about 100 by the end. I've done a couple hundred in one season before. That's probably a little too much for me, though.
And how much should we be bugging Tera right now for auto picking already? What round was that?
Tera, you do you. There's $10 on the line here. So go ahead, Tera.
When I logged in and saw it because it was the most horrible auto picks ever. Now, granted, it could have been worse. Like I did see, I'm on my game now because I was like, I can't auto pick Leonard Fournette and who else is up there? It's that are coming up and that'll be auto picks. So yeah, I pride myself on not auto picking and being pretty prompt, but this one didn't work out for me.
You reach a point this year, you're going to get Kyler Murray if you do that because he hangs around at the top of the queue, yes. Apparently. But yeah, Tera, I was very surprised. I think you had the 2nd pick in this one. I had the 4th and whatever round, maybe round 5. I saw you pull the trigger on Alvin Kamara, and I thought, that's odd. That's odd. I thought,
that doesn't sound like Tera, right?
No, which is a compliment. I know you're smarter than that. So who knows? Maybe Kamara skates, Major. I don't know. Maybe we get him for a full year.
Watch her. Even though she did all that, she will still win the league. Watch her.
I'm already trying to figure out how to repair it. So I'm thinking about it. I'm like, okay, we can work around this. We can do this. I got the first 3 picks. And I was like, okay, this is a cool track. Let me see how this trend goes. And then I just royally screwed it up. But we're gonna figure it out.
It's one of many, I'm sure, right? Best ball drafts that you'll do. It's not the end of the world, I don't think.
It'll be my only Kamara share. So look,
if you're lucky, look, I'll take him. I'll take any. I think we all would. You take anybody. I take a chance on Alvin Kamara. I haven't found the right range yet. to do that. Like when I'm going in and if I'm looking for maybe a fourth running back and I'm in the double-digit rounds, he's long gone, and that's fine. I get it. Even if you get suspended for 6 games, you can tell yourself a happy tale that for the remaining 11, he's going to help you. And, you can look at it this way too. If he misses the first 6 games, he's not going to get hurt the first 6 weeks of the season, right? So, if you have a little bit of attrition, maybe he comes on in week 7. Who knows, though, with Kamara? I think, most of us are trying to tiptoe around that, stay as far away as possible until we get a little clarity.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned, because just getting into this whole best ball, we're starting to see players starting to get cut right now. So you're making draft picks. And you're like, oh, crap, I just took Leonard Fournette. And you're like, he just got cut today or he's going to get cut. And you're like, does that make it more exciting for you not knowing what could happen ahead of free agency, ahead of the draft? Is that kind of the excitement going into it?
I don't know if it's the more exciting, but I'm not shying away from it. Like, I think you can also spin it that, all right, Leonard Fournette got cut. So he's not going to be in a timeshare where maybe he's the guy behind Rachaad White. Maybe he goes to Carolina, right? Or maybe he goes to some other landing spot that's a little less crowded and it actually works out better. Maybe he won't have the same value he had the last couple of years when Tom Brady was throwing him a billion dump-off passes. But there is that. I think there is some of that. Like you drafted DeAndre Hopkins. Who's he going to play for? You're drafting the talent. And you hope that if someone's going to trade for DeAndre Hopkins, they're not going to take on a guy making $17+ million a year unless they have a plan to get him the football. You're not going to see a team that's breaking in a quarterback, I wouldn't think, trying to get him. So hopefully he goes to a place with an established quarterback, if he in fact is dealt. And I think the scariest thing, and Tera, I know you play a lot of these, tell me if you agree, is when you're drafting quarterbacks or tight ends, if you only take 2 and they end up on the same bye week, I feel devastated. I feel worse than I do drafting Alvin Kamara in round 5.
I agree.
So what's old is new again? Could we see maybe Fournette show up in Duval County? I mean,
no.
Travis Etienne's already there. The price tag might be right.
Way too fast.
No, it's not that the current administration has anything against Leonard Fournette. I think Leonard Fournette's going somewhere that he can get the most money at this stage of his career. He's got his ring. That's not going to be Jacksonville. I mean, Travis Etienne's going to be their guy.
Michael Hasty just signed.
Right. JaMychal Hasty's back. Snoop Connor. Look, Snoop Connor had like 12 touches last year. He was a draft pick in the 5th round. And granted, James Robinson was there for a month at the beginning of the season, but Etienne was a 1,400-yard guy. They don't want to run the ball a ton. I mean, Doug Peterson would like to throw it 65% of the time, probably. I don't know if he'll ever, consistently hit that mark, but look at how many games Etienne carries a true workhorse workload. It's not that many. I don't think they feel the need to bring in a guy the level of Leonard Fournette. And one thing Trent Baalke said at the scouting combine today, the Jags GM, is that they're very big on their running backs also playing special teams. And they picked up Kadri Olison, formerly of the Falcons. He's to a reserve futures contract, so he'll be on the practice squad, chance to make the active roster. I wouldn't be shocked if the running back room is already set for this team, or if they draft one late, it's a guy who's competing for the 3rd spot with Snoop Connor. But I don't think another back of significance, although I have driven Jacksonville airwaves crazy for the last week or so, because I've had this obsession with the idea of if Bijan Robinson, let's say, is number 7 on your board, and he's sitting there at 24, and this is a team with not a lot of glaring holes. They have some needs. There's no question about it. But how do you pass up a talent like that? Even if you have ETN, I don't think they would do that. But right, I honestly hope he's gone before the Jaguars come up, and he may well be. Right, who knows with these mock drafts? Right, he goes 10 to Philly, or he goes 30 to Philly, right, depending on what people feel about who they want to give to Philly with the other pick. I think so. Long story short, Leonard Fournette not in Jacksonville.
Well, let's keep Bijan Robinson away from Tampa Bay as well, because I want to see the Rachaad White thing kind of fly up there in Buccaneers County there. But when we look at this Jacksonville team, I think they were projected about 6.5 wins last season. They shot way past that. They got the 9 wins, won the division, and then Mike Dempsey, where were you when the Jaguars were down 27 points to the Los Angeles Chargers? And what was that like for you? Because I know not only are you like the play-by-play guy, do that stuff on Jaguars radio, but you're a fan of the Jags as well.
Well, look, I'll be honest. I grew up a fan of the Jets. Okay. And, I was from Connecticut originally. All my teams are New York teams, except for college football, because nobody cared about college football when I grew up in that area. But anyway, so gradually, as Jacksonville got a new team, I was still kind of a Jets fan. I started covering the team back in 96, their second year. So I've been around a little while. And, over time, obviously, look, I've been blessed beyond measure to be able to do sports talk radio with the same station in Jacksonville now for over 15 years. And before that, I had a pretty long tenure at one of our competitors who's no longer around. But regardless, as my livelihood, my life revolves around that football team. It does in many ways. I mean, that's what I do. And, they become what I consider myself. I don't consider myself a dyed-in-the-wool fan. Like, I don't have the right to wear the t-shirt, like, look at me, look at me. It's more about, I'm a supporter. I want them to succeed. I want the city of Jacksonville to succeed. I love the fans, the fan base. It's fun. So where was I? I was in the stadium, and the radio network studio is kind of on the ground floor. So we don't see the game. We watch the game on a live feed, non-delayed. And so we're hearing it as it's going on. We're listening to the play-by-play broadcast. So as they're coming back, the fun thing is, and I've been going to these games for a long time, and people are like, oh, Jacksonville doesn't have any fans. Well, they've stunk. Matt, you mentioned the 6.5 over-under. You could have been retired by now if you bet the under for the last dozen
Right.
years, and you would have won like 10 out of 12 times. So I'm down there, and, they're down 27-0, and we're devastated. I mean, come on. They're not coming back from 27-0, and we're just get one before the half. And that wasn't a fifth interception for Trevor Lawrence. That was a touchdown. Let's get one before the half. So they got the one before the half, and then they started coming back, and they had done it so many times for the second half of the year that you really, having been around it, we believed that it was coming, and it was coming, and it was coming. And then it went down. And I've got photos of we took photos there the week before. It was so historic. It was the biggest comeback in team history, obviously, third biggest in NFL history. Fred Taylor does the post game with me, or at least the first hour of the post game. JP Shadrick is the lead host. I'm with JP and Fred Taylor. And Fred said, and of course he played his football in Jacksonville primarily starting in 1998. And those were good years when he first got there. He said it was the best atmosphere he'd ever seen at a home game. Now, I've had other Jaguars from that era tell me Fred got a little carried away, but regardless, it's hard to top, right? You come back from 27 down, you win on a last second field goal. Your quarterback he threw 4 interceptions, and he kept slugging and threw 4 touchdowns and overcame it and showed you why people believe what he could be. And then, they didn't, I wouldn't say go toe to toe with Kansas City, but didn't play an unrespectable game, and partly due to Mahomes getting injured, certainly. But I think they feel like they left a lot on the table. It's a great feeling to have, as opposed to, can we just get the season over with, which is what we've had most of the last dozen years or so.
So you kind of talk about that whole playoff thing, the excitement there, what this team is building. What do you see them doing this offseason? What do the people down in Duval County want to see the Jags do here? Accomplish? We mentioned Jermichael Hasty re-signing. They also locked in what's his name there? Robertson Harris. They got him.
Roy Robertson Harris. Yeah.
So
what do they want to do? That they want to win the Super Bowl the next 10 years, right? That's what fans
next
are.
year.
Right?
Next year.
They want to trade for T. Higgins. So do I. That ain't happening. They want everything. They want it all. And why shouldn't they feel that way, right? You see Cincinnati go from 4 wins to the Super Bowl.
Right.
You see teams go from worst to first. They went literally from the worst team in the league 2 years running to division champs, playoff team. And clearly they have the best quarterback in the division. And that is so big in today's NFL. So, look, I think if the realistic fans want to see Calvin Ridley get reinstated so he could play for the Jags for the first time and hopefully be a 1A or 1B with Christian Kirk. They want Evan Ingram back, and he will be, whether a contract extension or the franchise tag. There's no doubt that will happen. They like Arden Key and Jawan Taylor to be back, but they're not sure financially if that's going to work out as well. The Jags went from being about 32 over the cap to being under the cap in the last week. So we all know that the money is kind of play money. The biggest thing, you have to have an owner who's willing to put the cash up front. that you can front load these deals, turn them into signing bonuses. Shad Khan is one of the richest owners in the National Football League, and he's never been tight with his money. I mean, he spends money like a drunken sailor, right? So, it's just that there's guidance now. There's actually the Doug Peterson, Trent Baalke duo is actually steering him in a good direction. Before, he was throwing money at what different general managers are telling him, and it wasn't a good plan for the long haul. So I think Jag fans want to see, we all want the excitement of, new, fresh free agents and draft picks, but I just think they want to see bring most of the band back, get Ridley reinstated, and have a healthy offseason, because it's not going to be so much the additions to the roster that make the improvement for this team. It's going to be the additions to the game of Trevor Lawrence. How much better can he get from year 2 to year 3? He is still ascending, and that's where you're going to see the biggest improvement from this football team, in my opinion.
Well, you mentioned that money. They were definitely not afraid to throw it around last year. Evan Ingram, big fan. We're a big fan of him here on this show. Yeah. Christian Kirk, I'm probably one of the biggest fanboys when it comes to Christian Kirk. I was touting him all offseason, really loved him coming through. So I really love what the Jaguars were able to do on the offensive side of the ball. Do we see them maybe attacking the draft now, more on the defensive side of the ball, maybe some more edge rushers if they lose Arden Key? Because in that 22 to 27 range, there is some pretty solid defensive linemen, edge guys that could be had in that range.
Well, starting with defense, yes. Who doesn't need more pass rush, right? And so certainly if the right guy is there, they could definitely go that direction. If there were a pass rushing interior defensive lineman, I don't know if that really matches up with what, most of the pundits say is going to be the value at that time. Who couldn't use that as well? Pressure from the interior. They need quarterback help. They don't have a nickel corner really to speak of on the roster. It's why a guy like Brian Branch might be a good fit, because he's versatile. He can play nickel early. He could transition into playing safety for you if Rayshon Jenkins gets too expensive beyond this year. In fact, that's a guy they thought, at the beginning of the year probably wouldn't be back, and then he probably turned out to be their defensive MVP this past year. So, yeah, they definitely need shoring up on the defensive side of the ball. There's no question about it, but I think any smart team, guys, goes into the draft, you don't go, we got to draft defense here. I mean, what if Quentin Johnson's sitting there for you at 24, right? I mean, let's say Calvin Ridley is reinstated. He's got a 1-year deal. What if he's not the same player that we remember and we hope he is, right? So then next year, Calvin Ridley, only on the 1-year deal. Zay Jones would be going into the last year of his deal. You can never stop looking ahead. And if Evan Ingram goes the franchise tag route instead of a long-term extension, do you look at that as a position where tight end doesn't usually hit the ground running in the NFL? So maybe you get one there, and by year 2, he's ready to be your primary pass catcher in that department. But yeah, Matt, I think if you're betting, I think defense is the way to go there. But I honestly think there are a lot of things on the table. That includes offensive tackle if Jawan Taylor's not back.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go really wrong. The good thing is they're in that position now. It's kind of weird saying this as when we're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're in a position to go best player available, right? This is something that they haven't necessarily been in that position the last few years, but with Trevor Lawrence and the maturation to his game here the last couple seasons, taking that next step last season, getting ready for that another step here this season. I mean, I think a lot of people have him in Dynasty as a top 5 quarterback. And I don't think that's an exaggeration when you look around what this landscape looks like. We all know about the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Justin Herberts. And I think Trevor Lawrence, a Clemson alum, Tera, he's right up there in that conversation. I don't know if he's up there with Mahomes yet, but I mean, I think top 5, top 6 is definitely in the ranges of outcome for him each and every season here moving forward.
Oh, trust me, Tera and I bond every time she comes on the Football Diehards radio show over our mutual affection for Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne. And let's get T. Higgins down to Duval too, Tera. Come on.
Exactly. I'm one more player away from screaming Duval. This is one more.
I don't know. That's probably asking too much, but I'm right there with you. Look, he is what he was promised to be. I mean, I don't even want to go into the situation. We all know the situation his rookie season. It was ludicrous. I mean, it was ludicrous. So put that aside. He started the year off a little bit shaky this year. Two of the losses that really hang in Jaguar fans' memories are the first Houston game and the Denver game in London. And in each of those games, Trevor Lawrence threw a devastating end zone interception on a rollout play when all he had to do was sail it through the back of the end zone and live to fight another down. And eventually he just said enough is enough, and started not just playing conservatively, just playing, I don't know what the word for it is, maybe a little bit more concisely, right? Just it wasn't throwing the picks. The interceptions weren't there, but the touchdowns were. He played with more confidence. They started to get it. Right, Major. I mean, you look at the game against Baltimore. They come back. The Ravens have them down pretty big. And you're thinking, here's another loss or maybe another one-score loss. They lost 5 in a row, one-score games, I believe, maybe at that point in the season. And so they score a touchdown to go down by only a point with about 2 seconds left, and they didn't even hesitate. We're not going to kick the field goal or the extra point. We're going to send Trevor Lawrence out there, and he's going to throw a 2-point conversion. And he threw a seed to Zay Jones with about 2 inches of a window to put it in, and just showed you that they believe that, trust me, I don't need to hype it up. The players in that locker room believe that this guy is the real deal. You can't fake it. He's got everything you want. He's always been a winner. That doesn't guarantee you success in the NFL, but I think what we saw in the second half of last year is a major sign of things to come.
Yeah, and I honestly think that he's going to unlock to that next level as soon as he gets those check downs. He gets 1,000 yards out the backfield from ETN. So I think they're going to be interlocked for his success,
Yeah, I think so. Major, I think you're right. If he adds a little of that, I don't think they want that to be their primary focus. I think they have guys that they feel can win down the field, and they want to pick up chunk yardage. And it's interesting. One thing that Doug Peterson talked about today was the toughness of Travis Etienne. He's not built like that, though. You watch that guy week in, week out. He takes more body shots than you're wondering how can he continue to get up. But I agree with you, Major. Get him in space. Throw the ball out to him. I mean, when they drafted him, now granted, different head coach, different offensive coordinator and all that. Right. But they talked about basically making him a slot wide receiver. He's got the ability to do it. I just think they're content that especially with Ridley coming on. Marvin Jones Jr. had 81 targets last year. Right. Ridley could add 40 to that, right? You're not going to take any away from Christian Kirk. Right. Zay Jones is solid 3. Evan Ingram, if he comes back, he's going to be making, $10+ million a year. That's where the ball's going through the air. I mean, I think you're right, Major. ETN has the ability to do it. I think if people are expecting that 65 catch breakout this year, whatever number they put on it, they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah, all Trevor Lawrence. Sorry, I was gonna say all Trevor Lawrence needs is the best route runner in professional football, and that's Hunter Renfrow, and he'd be good to go.
Take him too. Bring them all. Bring all the Tigers back. Let's go.
Let's not do that in front of company, please. Let's not do that.
Why not?
So, Mike, you mentioned Jaguar memories just a few seconds ago, and 2 of the players that come to my mind when I think of Jacksonville Jaguars and going back are Jimmy Smith and Fred Taylor. You mentioned Fred Taylor there. I mean, are there 2 more underrated players in the national football, in the history of the NFL, than both Jimmy Smith and Fred Taylor?
Jimmy certainly,
for sure,
I think, is at the top of that list. When you consider, people are, he only made 1 Pro Bowl. They played in a small market, but putting that aside, it was a weird era in the AFC. Every year you looked up, you had Sean Alexander and Priest Holmes and LaDainian Tomlinson and you name it, Larry Johnson and Jamal Lewis going for 2,000 yards. And I went back once and I looked at every one of Fred's years, and he only made the Pro Bowl 1 time. And I said, honestly, with the exception of 1 year, I felt like there were 3 guys in that given year that were just as good or better. But the thing with Fred is for all the talk about him being fragile early in his career, he's got the most rushing yards of anyone who's eligible for the Hall of Fame and who's not in there right now. He averaged 4.6 yards a carry. Jim Brown, when Fred Taylor was active, used to refer to him as the best running back in football. Not once, repeatedly said Fred Taylor is the best back in the game. The guy was 235 and ran 4.3 something. I mean, how
many long runs did he have? It seemed like every time I looked at a highlight, it was a 40-yard, 60-yard touchdown. Every time
you look, we just had James Stewart on our show, former Jaguar running back, last week, and he got hurt in, I guess it was the 98 season, and Fred Taylor comes in and like 2 plays later, he's taking a 50 to the house or 40, whatever it was, 50, 49 yards. Had a 90-yard run in that 62-7 playoff victory over Miami. Think about that, 62-7. How that team was so good, but they couldn't beat the Tennessee Titans. And so Fred and Jimmy and Tony Baselli, who finally got into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, didn't have that Super Bowl appearance and certainly not that ring on their resume. And, you know, it was tough. I think Freddie, if you've forgotten how good he is, just go look at some of his YouTube highlights, and how a man that size can do what he did, I think, is astounding. Jimmy Smith was the goods. He was a 5-time Pro Bowler. Couple of things work against Jimmy. The era of so many good wide receivers. I mean, you look at Rod Smith's career numbers. Nobody talks about Rod Smith as a potential Hall of Fame, right? Rod Smith's numbers are almost identical to Jimmy's, and Rod Smith has 2 Super Bowl rings, and he has an 80-yard touchdown in one of those Super Bowls that we all remember very well. I mean, he not only played, but he shined in the postseason. He's not even on the radar. I mean, it was such a loaded era, and it continues to be. And now with Jimmy, wide receiver after wide receiver's coming out, and they're all going to blow past him, and his numbers are going to shrink along the way. The other thing, look, Jimmy had drug issues late in his career, and he retired abruptly when he was still had a lot of games left. Jimmy could have played another 3, maybe 4 years, and if he's averaging 1,000 yards, he's probably in the Hall of Fame. He probably has 2 more Pro Bowls, and he's in the Hall of Fame now. And you know, what can you do? You can't turn back time. Jaguar fans realize how good these guys were. I think Fred eventually gets in. He's been a semifinalist now, maybe 3 times for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Hasn't made it to the final 15, but it'll take a while. But I think Fred will eventually get in. I'm not sure with Jimmy, to be honest with you.
I also feel like Fred's the longevity of his career as well. I mean, that's pretty odd, you know, the level of time that he was with Jacksonville as well. He was
with them for a long time, Tara. And one thing, too, that happened with him with Pro Bowls is Fred Taylor was like a closer, not only for games, but for seasons. Like, he'd hit his stride, and then he'd rip off 600-800-yard games in a row. And a lot of times, you know, Pro Bowl voting would close early December, and Fred's doing his best work. But regardless, I mean, you know, he eventually went to New England, retired up there. There's a time when, you know, even Tom Brady had to leave New England, right? I mean, most players don't get to play their whole career, but Fred's a lifetime Jag, loves the team. Jimmy's a lifetime Jag, loves the team. Honestly, it's a beautiful thing about Jacksonville. So many. Now, these guys, Jimmy is in Alabama, I think now, if not Mississippi. Went to college in Mississippi. Fred's in South Florida, but he does come up to work the games. But so many of their teammates are now permanent residents of Jacksonville. It's, you know, I don't want to say too much because I don't need anybody else moving there. But, you know, it's a gorgeous place to live. And people are, it's Jacksonville. I don't care. I don't need your big city. We got 1 million people. We got beaches. We got everything we need. We got golf like crazy. We got a professional NFL football team. I love it here. I could see why these guys stayed.
Well, we'd love to talk about contractually obligated football talk here, but we got to go behind the grind here with Mike Dempsey next. And you talk about Fred Taylor being a closer. Well, let's put you in the closer position. Say you're coming in the 9th inning to close out a ball game. What is that intro music going to be to introduce you to the fans?
I mean, I can't steal from Mariano, so I'm just gonna. That's a tough one, you know. I'm not a closer music kind of guy like that. you tune into football diehards, it's all heavy metal. That's all Bob Harris. Like, I get home, I'm like, Alexa, play me some 70s easy listening music, please. So, you know, I don't know if there's something by, you know,
are you coming out to Kenny G?
No, God, no, not Kenny G. For God's sake. At least like some lyrics.
Okay, thank you. I just scared me for a second.
I'm I like a little of everything, but that's tough. I'll say, how about this? Probably Eminence Front by The Who. That would be the one. All right. The Who's my favorite band. That's got, you know, just like a kick-ass instrumental intro to it, and that one gets me going. So yeah, I'll give you Eminence Front. I'm a bad short answer guy. You may have figured out by now, right? I talk for a living. You ask me a simple question, Matt, and I just got to run on at the mouth. So Eminence Front by The Who. Let's go.
You know what? I gave Major the heads up before we went out. Don't you worry about any dead air. There's no dead air today. Hey, you know what? Guilty pleasure. Hey, I love myself some Journey's greatest hits. I'll throw that on a road trip, and I'm good to go. So, what's one of those guilty pleasure songs that you're like, oh, really, Mike? You're going to listen to that song? What is that one
all
song?
right. I'll get anything by ABBA. I'll sing anything by ABBA, or anything by the Bee Gees. For goodness sakes,
Okay, the Bee Gees.
All right,
Bee Gees.
got a little disco flavor to you.
Like the pre-disco era Bee Gees is really good stuff. I like all their stuff. I mean that is I'd say that's qualifies. Both of those should be slightly embarrassing to me. So
hey, you know what?
So two excellent choices.
Well, thank you.
Tera's big into ABBA. Tera likes her
That's
ABBA.
my style. I do. I do.
That's all right.
And the Bee Gees too. Come on now.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
And look, Fleetwood Mac. That's not a guilty pleasure. Everybody, I mean, Fleetwood Mac's one of the most popular bands. So are the Bee Gees, for goodness sakes. But all right.
Well, that's all right. I'm gonna start going. I'll see if I get the hashtag going. Disco Dempsey on online on the social.
You can
media.
try.
It's gonna stick. It's gonna stick.
So we talk about that being your walkout intro music there. Now I do know, what was the best walk-up song from a baseball player that you heard, perhaps with the Jacksonville Suns AA baseball team?
Oh God, man. I don't think we had walk-up songs. I did. I was the number 2 guy for the Suns for 5 years, so which meant I did play-by-play for the middle 3 innings. They had just become a Dodgers affiliate back in the early 2000s. And 2 of my first 3 years, they won the Southern League Championship. It was fantastic. It was I put it all on me. But I worked with Alan Garrett was the main guy for the first couple of years, and then Joe Block, who is the Pittsburgh Pirates guy now, was the guy I was in the booth with. And I couldn't, man, if there was a walk-up song, man, I couldn't remember a single one. But baseball is my first love, much more than football. I love fantasy football. It's basically the only fantasy that I play. The rest of them are too complicated to me. But, if I could only watch one team for the rest of my life, it'd be the New York Yankees. And I did grow up in Connecticut, as a kid in the mid to late 70s. Mm-hmm. There's a pretty natural reason to be rooting for the Yankees. And people are like, oh, you're rooting for the Yankees, or, come on. Yeah, I'm not Michael Fabiano. And I'll tell Fabs to his face. No, seriously. I'll tell Fabs, I love you, Fabs, if you're listening. But my man likes the Yankees, the Cowboys, and the Lakers. Like, What are we doing here, man? Come on. Right? And, Manchester United was busy that day. I mean, it's just, so anyway.
Man. Yeah, so when you were growing up, like, did you play any sports? And if you did, like, what sports did you play, and who were some of the players you looked up to?
Primarily, I played a lot of baseball, played a lot of basketball into high school. Wasn't good enough to play college, anything other than intramurals. Played intramural, everything, but didn't play football. Didn't play golf, and that's the only sport I play now, as much as I possibly can. I should have gone out today, as a matter of fact, but I wasted a beautiful afternoon. But mostly baseball, a little bit of soccer when I was very young. Even back then, soccer was, hey, it's the next big thing, kids, if you haven't heard. Who did I look up to? Reggie Jackson's my all-time favorite guy.
Nice.
And I tell you a little story, quick one. Sure. I think it was 78. They're playing a doubleheader versus the Blue Jays. And they had won the World Series the year before. And Reggie hit the 3 home runs in Game 6 on 3 consecutive swings. In fact, he had homered in Game 5. People forget that in his last at-bat. So 4 straight swings, ball left the yard. And he had a 4-pitch walk mixed in. And so Reggie was my guy. But my dad, as was his want, my dad was born in Ireland and might have enjoyed an adult beverage or 10. And so one fine weekend afternoon, he takes me to the local watering hole. And here's a couple of quarters for the pinball machine, and I'll see you when I see you. And so I'm watching the Yankees play the Blue Jays in a doubleheader. And Thurman Munson strikes out. And I, as a kid, I'm like 8 years old. I'm talking to the television. I say, Reggie, show him how it's done. No kidding. Next pitch, home run. And like, as a kid, I thought I might have caused that. I'm not 100% sure, but I may have caused that to happen. So, he's like a magical figure to me. And, people always tell you, don't meet your heroes, right? You're going to be disappointed. And unbeknownst to me, I had a producer, my first afternoon drive show in Jacksonville, going back 18 years or 20 years or whatever. and he tried to get Reggie on for my birthday and couldn't do it. He only told me after the fact. And then I heard a couple of not so pleasant stories about him. So I'm going to go, no, and pretend I'm not listening. But Reggie was my guy. Then Don Mattingly was my guy. And then Derek Jeter was my guy. And I wanted Gleyber Torres to be my guy, but now I'm not sure about the longevity and pinstripes. But I still bleed Yankee blue.
So I got to jump in here real quick there. What about hockey up there? Because I know Connecticut, they had the Hartford Whalers way back when.
They did have the Whalers.
Had the Buffalo Sabres, the Rangers, the Islanders, all in that little area there.
Oh, bro, I lived on Long Island Sound, so I could claim the Islanders if I wanted to, right? They're right across the water from me. But I didn't really have a hockey team back then. I was a Yankees fan. I was a Knicks fan. I was a Jets fan. And the irony is I moved to Florida in the late 70s with my family, and the Islanders won like from 80 through 83. They won 4 consecutive Stanley Cups. So I kind of adopted them once they got really good. And I told people, oh, yeah, Mike Bossy, Dennis Potvin, they're my guys. And, I knew enough to be dangerous, but nowhere near as much as you, Matt Donnelly.
Hey, real quick, who's your favorite Nick and favorite Jack?
Current or all time?
All time.
I love Mark Jackson when he played for the Knicks because I'm a St. John's fan, and
That's my guy.
Straight out of St. John's. Although Chris Mullen was my dude, that St. John's team was ridiculous in the mid '80s. If Villanova could have beaten Georgetown in the semis, St. John's would have a title. Damn it! But St. John's like the Jags in '99 could beat the Titans. St. John's couldn't beat Georgetown. I mean, Ewing became, even though I hated Georgetown, like once you come to my professional team, all that ends. Like you're my guy now. And so I love Patrick Ewing, I love Anthony Mason. I love that tough Knicks ball era in the 90s. When they got so close to winning it all against Houston, and then we had the white Bronco chase in the middle of the playoffs. It was absurd. Favorite Jet, Jeff Lageman is a guy I work with, and he played for them and the Jaguars. He won't be listening to this. It wasn't Jet. Let's see. Who was my favorite Jet? Might be, you know what? Honestly, might be Leon Washington, who's a personal friend of mine. He was a Jacksonville kid, was Mr. Football in the state of Florida, and just a good all-around dude, man. I don't know if I've ever really had a favorite Jet as much as I've had, some other favorites in some of the other sports.
Let's have a little bit more personal now. Tell us about yes. No. Tell us about a decision that changed the trajectory of your life.
Oh, gee. Man, I mean, I don't know if have you guys ever heard of Young Life? Do you know what that is? It's a non-denominational Christian youth group, right? That's popular like in junior high and high school. So a lot of my friends in high school, we were all into this, and I had a great friend who was the leader of the local group. It was probably in his mid-20s at the time. We were all high school students, and his name was Mike Legaspi. And Mike met his wife Nancy at Flagler College, which is in St. Augustine, Florida, which is where I actually live. It's about an hour south of Jacksonville, and I commute up there. But I decided that I was going to be the president of Young Life. And Flagler College was kind of like a hub for that. And, long story short, I didn't become the president of Young Life, but I did go to Flagler College. And Mike told me, if you go there for 4 years and stay for 4 years, you'll meet your wife. I guarantee you. And Heather's right now asleep in the other room. So, yes, he was right. We celebrate coming up in April our 33rd anniversary of our first kiss. How about that? That goes back to 1990. Romanticism is not dead, people.
You're so romantical.
Yeah, well, just decided to go to Flagler College. I mean, it changed the course of my life. Met my wife. We stayed in St. Augustine. And then, a couple of years later, Jacksonville's getting a professional franchise. I'd gone to school for psychology. I went back and got a broadcasting degree and didn't know at the time where it was going to take me. But I used to listen to the Pete Rose show. And God bless you, Pete, but he did a horrible radio show, my man. And he had great guests because he was Pete Rose to get anybody on, but he would literally read like John Saraceno columns out of the USA Today. And I'm like, is this all it takes to do this job? I could do this job. I could read that. And here we are all these years later.
See, that's my problem. I don't read real well.
Ah, well, there you go. The
It's all
further you
original.
go, Matt, the less you need to read, right? Just when the red light's on, you talk, and it's fine.
Exactly. Keeping on the job track, let's talk about your journey a little bit. In the fantasy industry, in the radio industry, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen now versus when you started?
Wow. I mean, radio, we used to have to get a license to be on radio. I don't quite know why. I first got into radio like 30 years ago, and I volunteered at my college radio station because they'll put anybody on. So I did that, and then we told him that, we don't do any sports. We don't do any play-by-play. So he's like, well, do it. Like, you be the creative people that create this. And so I became Flagler College's first ever play-by-play guy for a number of sports. Didn't do it for that long, but it kind of got me into it. And the very first game we called was truly down to wire, last second shot off the back of the rim, no good, 1-point game against their arch rival. It was everything you could hope for as a broadcaster. And that night, as I'm leaving the gym, I'm walking over to the radio studio. My boss, so to speak, my program director came up and he's all excited. He's like, you could do this for a living. I'm like, what? At that point, I was just like, this is pretty fun. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I did every job you could imagine in radio. I did sales, horrible. I did what's called traffic, horrible. Did all kinds of things. All I want to do is talk. I was a program director for years. I was an assistant program director. I was all these things that I wanted nothing to do with. So, along the way, with the Jags in town, I did a show with Maurice Jones-Drew in Jacksonville in his second year in the league. And it's funny because Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio started up, whatever it was now, 12 years ago. And they reached out to MJD because remember that game against the Jets where he went down at the 1-yard line. And in the post game, Tera, he apologized to his fantasy managers for not scoring the touchdown. And back then, fantasy was kind of a bit of a dirty word, right? I mean, that is one thing that has changed drastically. You got Austin Eckler doing his own show. LaDainian Tomlinson has done a show. Roddy White has done a show. I mean, Tony Romo wanted to host the big convention and they shut him down. And now they're all about gambling. I mean, I talk about the hypocrisy. So the NFL has embraced this. I had a friend in Jacksonville who started a sports bar about 20 years ago. And he hated fantasy football. I don't have any time for it. I said, who do you think is in your sports bar on Sunday at 6 p.m. when the Arizona Cardinals are on? Because they damn sure ain't any Arizona Cardinal fans, right? The Jags are over. Everyone's gone home. And, you got to embrace this. And he didn't. And he was out of business in 2 months. No, true story. So I do think the embrace of it used to be, you geeky pencil pushers. I don't care. Call me a geek, man. Call me whatever you want. I really could care less. I like doing me. I'm 54 years old. I don't worry. I try not to worry about what other people think. I love my wife. I have a great son. I have a great family. I have a great job. I have great friends like you guys. It's phenomenal. You want to laugh? We're laughing all the way to the bank because, the industry is thriving. It's fantastic. There's so many smart people. It is so much more math now, Tera. I'm not that guy, right? I have a lot of respect for right, and I respect that. I do. I'm not that person who can go 15 standard deviations above the mean on this and that. I'm just I'm a gut player, Major. That's what I am, and that it works for me.
I'm with you.
Yeah, so I do think math. I remember when Joe Bryant rolled out value-based drafting, and it was like something radical, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's not radical. Travis Kelce outscores tight ends by 1 billion points. He's valuable. This shouldn't be radical. So I remember so many of these guys. You guys won't remember. Matt, you're a little bit older. AOL had these things called news groups. Okay, they were kind of like chat rooms, but they weren't like live streaming. You could post something. And then people could read that. They could reply to your post or what have you. It was like a message board, basically, but they called them news groups. And there was a fantasy football news group back then. And we started leagues out of that group. This was like in the late 90s. And Bob Harris was in there. And Joe Bryant was in there. And Sigmund Bloom was in there. And, just so many names in the industry, especially go back 25 years, some of the founding fathers of the fantasy industry were in there, but they weren't the founding fathers at that point in time. At least not all of them were. And I got in some dynasty leagues with some people who would go on to work for all the sites you could imagine, right? And leagues lasted a long time. And I had a little bit of a knowledge of knowing some of these people in the industry. Bob Harris and I have done radio together now for over 10 years. But the story is we had Dennis Dodds used to come on with me from Football Guys. And he was very generous with his time and would come on every week. And one week he got sick. And for me personally, got Wally pipped because Bob and I hit it off like that, right? And it was like, hey, Dennis, no offense, we're still promoting your site. Would you mind if Bob's available? Can he come on? So Bob and I had done a few years of doing kind of fantasy hits on my local show. And we had talked about how could we do a national show? And we had this idea of printing CDs and mailing them out in overnight mailing to radio stations. This is how things were done not that long ago. Or making it a downloadable show that stations could download and put out there. And we never could get our act together. Lo and behold, Sirius XM comes along. The guy who ran Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio's boss was Bob's friend from college. I mean, so it's like small world, right? I knew MJD, that got my foot in the door. And then Bob and I wanted to do a show together, and he knew the big boss. And he's like, I'll give you a chance. And unless they've forgotten, my paychecks are still coming. So I think they know we're still on. So it's been a long time. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, Tara, but again, there you go.
I think you answered like 5 questions.
I probably did.
Yeah,
right.
kill it.
All right, now you just did the whole show. Thanks, man. But let's see. You talked a little bit earlier about Fred Taylor. I played running back my whole life. I looked up to him. He's one of my favorite running backs of all time. Give us one of those stories, man. You got a Fred story? You and him interacting?
I mean, I can't tell that one. I'll tell you off the air.
I like that.
I will tell you that one off the air. It's not like Fred and I hang out. I want to misrepresent. It's not like we're pals. We'll text, what have you, and stuff like that. I just think for me, and he's done this show, he's done the post game now for the last several years. And it's just amazing to me to sit there and turn to my right, and there's Fred Taylor sitting there. And he's telling me that he's learning things from me about the radio business. And I'm like, but you're Fred Taylor. Like, what do you need to know? You just show up and be you. And it's validating. When we think we know, and then you talk to the guys who really know about, we think we know. And like, Major, you played a lot. So I'm not putting you in my group necessarily, but we don't think we know the ins and outs of football. Right. And then when you get around people who are truly the experts, it's a little intimidating at times, right? And to get that validation from Fred, and I work with Fred, I work with David Garrard, I work with Tom McManus, former Jaguar linebacker, I work with Donovan Darius, who's a former safety for the team, Tony Baselli, Jeff Loggeman. All these guys are regulars on my show in Jacksonville, with the exception of Baselli, who's a regular on our station. And, it's just, I look at me like, who am I? I'm just a kid with a psychology degree who thought Pete Rose couldn't do a good radio show. And here I am. How am I sitting next to Fred Taylor? I honestly don't know how I got here sometimes. And knock on wood, man. I mean, my wife is sometimes just shakes her head. She's like, you know how good you have it, right? I'm like, I do, honey. I do. I really do.
Oh, that's really dope that you appreciate that. Because,
bro,
if you're on social media and stuff, you kind of feel like sometimes a lot of people don't have that appreciation for the player and their knowledge of the game. But you saying that is like kind of reaffirming that you're a good dude.
Here's the thing though about that. Players will disagree with each other sometimes, right? Like sometimes you hear you didn't play the game, so you can't be right. I'm right because I played the game. Well, what if a guy who played the game comes along and agrees with my opinion? Then what are you going to, you know what I mean? So that whole, it's not the end all be all.
Right.
But at the same time, you got to have some degree of credibility when you're interacting with those guys, I think.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned that because I think I do a pretty good job breaking down film, scouting this and that. And then I hear Steve Smith talk about wide receivers. I'm like, yeah, I don't know shit. I mean, it's like,
right. I mean, and then you do, right? And that's the thing, you do, but they're in a different kind of stratosphere. You know what's fun? I've covered 14 Super Bowls, and I haven't gone to 14 Super Bowls. I covered 14 of them. And on Radio Row, it's when peer meets peer. Those are some of the best. Like, you can interview all the biggest names.
Right.
But some of my favorite interviews, like one time I had Fred Taylor sit down with Tim Hardaway, the basketball player.
That's my
Tim Hardaway.
basketball player.
And all Tim wanted to talk about was Fred Taylor's game, and all Fred wanted to talk about was the Texas two-step from his UTEP. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to sit back, and this is amazing, right?
That's so dope.
It really is, man. And you see these guys, when you get two of them on at the same time, and you kind of prompt them, and then all of a sudden they're just having a conversation. They don't even think that they're doing a show anymore. And then you know you got it, right? Then you just shut your mouth, throw it to break when they're done, and just smile all the way because your boss is very happy.
Some people would try to jump in there and try to, fit their little 2 cents in there, but I'm glad you're smart enough to know to let that
happen. You got to steer it a little bit.
Yeah.
But
you got to let it happen, though. Yeah.
You absolutely got to let it happen, man. No doubt.
I know that Mike does that to me every once in a while. I come on XM radio. He's like, yeah, we got to go to interview. Like,
yeah.
I got to shut up.
As I told Matt a million times, all my signals are for Bob, okay, including the middle finger. If you ever see that. In all seriousness, when we do our radio show, we do a little Zoom. So Matt and Tera come and hang out with us. And Major, we'll get you in there as well. My excuse is I don't book the guests. So that's a Harris deal. But I will put you on the front burner.
So you mentioned how good you got it here doing the radio thing. But if you weren't, let's take a step. Say the radio thing didn't pan out. We got your Flagler College, your BA there in psychology and communications. Could we be move over Dr. Phil? Dr. Dempsey is taking the couch.
I doubt it. I did initially think I'd be a clinical psychologist, like get a doctorate and do the whole thing. And I'm like, man, I don't know. Honestly, I really couldn't tell you, Matt. I really could not tell you. Hopefully, not spending every last dollar on the Powerball and praying, but that might have been it. It just kind of like one thing led to another. And I'll say that it's not like now, 25 years in, whatever it's been, 27 years, you look and you say, oh, okay, you're building a nice career. There were plenty of points in the early days when you make no money, you get no thanks, you get no respect, you get whatever, and you have to be willing to put up with it. I mean, I'm sure you guys have had those times getting into the fantasy industry at first when you're like, is this really going to take off? Is this market saturated? Is whatever? Am I good enough that they want to hear what I have to say? Why am I different than the next guy or lady or whomever to come along? And, you look up and you get through that, and all of a sudden you've got a foothold and you don't really think about it. And life goes on and you look back and you're like, damn, I'm glad I don't have to think about that too much, man, because I really don't know what I'd be doing. Probably destitute, quite frankly.
Well, you're putting it all together because if you think about it, you're basically like a fantasy football therapist. I mean, that's maybe the best way to put it. Yeah. You talk people out of bad decisions with their fantasy football rosters, right? You give better advice than Bob Harris. I mean, we
all know that. Come on.
Bob, come on, man.
Nothing I wouldn't say to his face.
Yeah,
now, the best advice, by the way, is just don't draft Alvin Kamara this year. That'd be probably my number one.
Oh, Tera.
Yes, that would. And if you had him in Dynasty, you should have traded him away.
You should have, unless he helped you win a title, which he probably did.
Yeah. Or like a runner-up. Like,
isn't that
I'm not speaking about myself in a couple leagues, but
that's funny.
Hey, I traded for him last season, Tera. I traded for him and who's the Viking? Eric Kendricks, the Vikings linebacker in an IDP dynasty. I won the league, but no thanks to Alvin Kamara, really. I mean, but nevertheless, I won the league. So if you win the league, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
So
it's like the Rams winning the Super Bowl, right?
Exactly.
You can't complain if you're the Rams. Not only are the Rams going to get, obviously they have their Super Bowl championship. They give up 2 firsts and a 4th to get Jalen Ramsey. And I saw one prospective trade where I think it was Houston would give, might not have been Houston, whoever it was would give up a 1st and a 4th to get him now. So you're telling me basically you rented Jalen Ramsey for 3 years for a first-round pick and you won a Super Bowl?
Yeah.
If you win it all, man, I mean, it really, you shouldn't complain as a fan base for the next half decade. That's my feeling, But
Yes.
it's not the way it is anymore. Everybody wants it all.
Every year. So have you ever went into an interview and it changed the way you thought about someone? Like, meaning you went and interview hearing some bad stuff about people and you interview him, actually, he's a pretty nice guy, or vice versa.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever gone into an interview thinking, really,
or even like if the guy was like, he was a good guy, but he left the interview, you're like, I don't know. Yeah,
no, I probably that's happened on occasion. And I'll be honest with you, I don't want to name names because guys have bad days, right? And if you catch somebody on a bad day, so be it. So there have been more of those, though, where you think, oh, this is going to go well. And all of a sudden the guy is a complete jerk for whatever reason. It's just part of the business, man. You can't take it personal. It's down with the media or whatever. I mean, but at the same time, like, I don't mind. I'll stick my nose in a scrum. I am, I can lock eyes. I'm good in a crowded scenario. I feel like when I'm interviewing people, I'm a big guy. I can box people out. I can get in there and do my thing. But as far as, I don't think I've ever gone into an interview going, oh, this guy's a real jerk, because then why have him on, right? If that's what you think going in. I probably have come to feel that a couple of them were jerks after the fact. But like I said, it's not worth it. Mike's mad because somebody said something to him mean 12 years ago. Yes, I am. But I won't tell you.
Hey, that's the best way to handle that situation. Smart man.
Yes. Heading back to fantasy sports. We talked about all the leagues that we're in, best ball strategies, how things have changed over time. What have you learned about yourself through fantasy sports?
I think I probably knew this already, but I am ruthlessly competitive. Not like underhandedly, but like,
I love that.
I mean, I once spent, Greg Rosenthal will back me up. Greg Rosenthal, we all know, NFL.com, right? He's been written for him for years. He was in one of those dynasties I talked about in the early days, coming out of those news groups with me. And so we would be on AOL Instant Messenger back in the day. And I remember maybe about a 3-night run of chatting with him, trying to pull a draft pick away from him for linebacker Monty Beisel of the Cincinnati Chiefs, or the Kansas City Chiefs, excuse me.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so absurd. Like, Monty Beisel, was he ever even good in IDP leagues? Not really, right? But at that moment, he might have had a good game, and Greg needed a linebacker. And we didn't do it. We kind of laugh about it to this day. That if I have a goal, like, I'm going to work to see it through. That is, I joke about being in radio. Oh, it's so easy. It's this and that. I'm not afraid to work hard. I really am not. And I tell people would ask, how do I get into radio or sports radio? I said 2 things. You volunteer at a community or a college radio station where they don't pay because they don't care. They'll put you on and you need reps. The other thing is never say no. Matt, you brought up that Jacksonville Suns job. One of the few sports I didn't do at Flagler College was baseball. And my program director, we had just gotten the team, the broadcast rights, and they needed to put a number 2 guy in the booth from our station. He goes, can you do baseball? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Never say no. You say yes. And you fail upwards. I mean, you never make them, do it and fake it till you make it. I mean, look, if the opportunity comes, you can't sit and go, I'm probably going to be better prepared a year from now. I mean, maybe you can. Some people probably can if you've got the clout to pull that off. I didn't have the clout to pull that off. Never say no. The first radio show I ever did, I went into my college radio station. And I walked into the program director. He didn't know me from Adam. And I said, I want to be on the radio. Literally, he goes, what are you doing at noon tomorrow? Wow. I said, I don't know. He goes, you're doing a classical music show. And maybe he was testing me to see if I would show up, but I showed up. And and I'd bake my way through doing a classical music show. I'd read enough. I'd make some notes. I'd introduce a piece, and I'd let it play for 20 minutes. And, and I only had an hour to fill major. It was awesome.
Nice.
But I think that, Tera, that like I am, in some senses, I'm ruthless. Like, and I don't mean that in a way like I would try to hurt anybody, or but I will go to the ends of the earth to win whatever I'm competing at, within the boundaries of not getting anybody hurt. Like I want to, if I can win every one of my fantasy games and embarrass you doing so, that's great with me. You know what I mean? Like we all feel that way, right? But I really, like, I try to keep my teams to a level where I can grind into the nitty gritty on all of them, because I can't stand not doing that. I can't stand mailing it in on anything I do. So I don't know if I learned that, but it has definitely reinforced itself with me.
I like that. I identify with that. I think my co-host here would say that I'm ruthless in getting my point across to them. So I maybe have.
There you go. Look, I play in a league every year with Tera in the Independence Day Invitational. I know how good she is, man. We're usually not bragging here, Tera, but we're usually two of the last four standing. Let's put it that way in that league. So.
Well, good news is Tera usually finishes second when it comes to debates on this show.
Oh no!
And Matt remembers history differently.
Is Matt third? Is that what I'm led to believe here?
See, Mike, here's my thought process. You never get in an argument with an idiot because they bring you down to their level and then they beat you with experience. And I've got the experience.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, and you can also intimidate with that mustache of yours, I suppose. So there's that.
He does, and then he can just mute me as well. That happens.
That is a big power. There's no doubt that is a big power.
But this goes.
That's why we can't have a radio show, Matt. No, that's why we can't.
It was like 2 years ago, and it's still like a thing, So she still it still burns a little bit.
Yeah, just like I said, nobody has ever done anything that ever bothered me in the past. I've got a list.
Yes. Speaking of people, though, relationships are important. Obviously, we know that the fantastic relationship you have with Bob Harris. Who are some of those people that you really respect in the industry and that have helped you along the way?
All right, don't let him hear this, but Matt Deutsch was my program director at Sirius for like 10 years and left to start up his own thing. Really, really good radio guy. Like that was a guy. If you haven't been a radio person, like radio people know other radio people, and there's just certain things about them. And there are a lot of people. It's definitely an industry where you can coast for a while if you want to. You're not going to last forever, but Matt's a grinder. He grinds on everything. He grinds on his work. He would be up till he'd take his work home with him every night and sleep like 4 hours, and just because he wanted the station to be the best it could be. So definitely Matt in terms of a boss, and Steve Cohen, man. I mean, he runs all the sports outfits for Sirius XM. This guy is amazing at what he does, but closer to home. I mean, there's so many, you start listing people and then you're going to leave a lot of people out. But my co-host in Jacksonville, Tony Smith, is like Mr. Versatility. I mean, and I don't mean that as an insult. He can do it all. He can do play-by-play. He can do color. He can do analysis. He can host. He can be a second. He can produce. He can be a news update guy. He can do anything, and he does them all equally well. And Tony and I have worked together for a long time. We've done the Jaguars Today show together like 9 years. In addition to that, we have a revolving, all those other guys I mentioned, we have a different day for each one to come in with us. But Tony's phenomenal. Not known nationally, although he is a frequent guest on our Football Diehards show when we talk about the Jaguars. Look, on the station, again, going to get into trouble if I don't name everybody, but Jeff Manns, Howard Bender, Jeff Radcliffe, they're my boys. I mean, tons of respect for not only their fantasy ability, but their broadcast ability. They have a lot of different styles. They're entertaining. We've worked together many times at big events like the draft and the Super Bowl and things like that. And just great guys, man. They're great guys. They're great ladies. They're just great people in this industry. And so, too many to name them all. Armando Marsal, there's another one. Jamie Calandro, Eric Romoff. There's so many. Rich Mileto. Rich is a guy who works for Fantasy Guru now, who a few years back, I played Fantasy NASCAR. And it was big at our station for a little while when the Yahoo had their game, right? Only time I've ever played any other fantasy sport other than dabbling in golf a little bit. And so the NASCAR station came to my program director and said, hey, do you have anybody who could do a fantasy NASCAR show? And I'm like, I'll do that. Because you never say no. So they hooked me up with Pete Pistone, who's one of the legends of that network. He's still on there. And so before I did that show, Rich was a guy who would just call our radio show. And I knew he was a big NASCAR fan. So I said, hey, do you mind if I reach out and actually talk to you person to person and tell me what you'd look for in a fantasy NASCAR show? Like, what would you want to hear about? And so Rich is a month from now, he'll be staying at my house. We'll be playing golf for a week down here in Florida. We've become great friends. I did the Super Bowl in Minneapolis a few years back. He and his wife came to meet me in person. They're from Wisconsin. And he's I truly consider him one of my best friends. We do golf trips. We try to do one every year the last few years. And just a great guy, good fantasy analyst, good fantasy player, but just, one example of the many people I would not have known otherwise.
Right. Give us one last piece of advice for those of us trying to make it in this fantasy world, sports industry, and then also give us some parenting advice. You mentioned you were a father earlier.
Yeah, parenting advice. My goodness, man. Get them off to college in one piece. So mission accomplished.
Yes.
Who am I to give parenting advice, man? Just because I'm a dad.
What you mean? You're a parent.
Yeah, but there's so many parents out there, and just never be afraid to tell your family you love them, right? Like, I know a lot of people like my age grew up with parents, and I wasn't that case, but there were a lot of dads that, you have to be a tough guy. You can't show emotion. I'm not that guy at all. Right. So I think you got to express to the people you care about. I had a good friend of mine, a high school friend. We're born exactly 1 month apart. We've been one of my best friends in the world. Just died last year, complications from COVID, and you never know, right? So there's that. So appreciate the people you love while they're around. The fantasy thing, you guys probably give as good advice as anything. I feel like I fell into it backwards because of my relationship with Maurice Jones-Drew. But I think it's like anything else, man. Don't give up. Don't take no for an answer. Submit work, grind. People will tell you, oh, it's saturated. People have been telling me for 20 years, radio's dead. It's a dying industry. It's over with. Okay. I think I'm going to make it to retirement. I don't think it's going away. People are still going to turn on the thing in their car, and it's called a radio, and it's still going to be there. So just don't give up, man. Believe in yourself. Try to have a unique perspective. Be yourself. There's room for so many different guys. We don't need to be cookie cutters, right? Everyone's got their own personality, their own look, their own angle. If you want to be the person who talks about nothing but tight ends and how they perform on 2nd and 7 or longer, you be that person. Be the best tight end analyst you can be, I think. It's like anything else, like any other line of work, just grind. And, here's one thing, and I know there's the longest answer of the night, but I truly believe this. Like, I have, maybe not, probably not. But I use this trick in my life several times. Think about where you want to be 10, 20 years, or look at yourself in the future. Okay. And for me now, like when I was 30, maybe I looked when I was 50, and look at where you're at and look at how great this is. And then turn around, and this is all in your head, of course, turn around and you'll see the whole path laid out, how you got there. I know that sounds crazy and touchy-feely, new agey stuff.
I like it,
but I've done it, and and you can't see every step along the way, but you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna grind. It's like anything. We take any new job, and it sucks the first few weeks because you don't know the routine and all that, and then you're in there for a couple months. You're like, oh, I got this thing wired, right? And you don't even worry about how you got there. But I really believe in visualizing where you want to be. And then, but taking it that extra step, when you visualize that, turn around and see how you got there. And I know that sounds crazy and it's not for everybody, but it's been good to me.
Well, you know what? Television certainly did not kill this radio star. So, Mike, we are glad to have you on the show this week. I mean, we could probably do this for another hour. Let's be honest, because I would love to go.
If you had two more questions, we could.
I mean, you know what? I could probably just
ask
right
one question, like, what's your name? And he'll go on for like a whole 2 years. I like it.
Well, my favorite part of this whole show is documenting the history of fantasy football. And I feel like we could have really dove into those early internet message board leagues that started with like Paul. I think Paul Charchian, he was on some of those.
Charch was in there.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we could go into that whole thing. Like you said, those were the pioneers before they were the pioneers, before they hooked up their wagons and headed to the fantasy West there. Right. So, I mean, this feels like a show that we could just the history of Fantasy X. I mean, I think we should get into that someday, maybe a little bit later. But I mean, we're running under that 70-minute mark here right now, and this has been another fantastic show. So, Mike, thank you very much for your time here this week. Make sure to catch Mike there on the Jaguars Today, that whole radio show during the season, and of course, football diehards, Mike. I mean, probably my favorite. There's literally two shows that I tune into religiously on there. It's the football diehard show, just to see where that bar is being set each and every week in case I have to come on there. If I could trip over it, I feel much better about myself rather than having to reach for it. So that's kind of where I stand there. And there's a couple other shows I like to catch every once in a while. But you're right. So many great people on that network there and voices, and we've had them on the show. And we're glad to have you on the show to kind of talk about your journey, your path, and of course, Major and Tera with us each and every week. But Mike, did I miss anything? What are we working on right now as we're heading into draft season?
What am I working on? My handicap, man. I mean, it's I'm drafted best ball drafts. That's the work I'm putting in, and I'm hitting buckets of balls to get that swing back because football season, not a whole lot of golf time out there. But really, in all seriousness, I respect you guys a lot. Appreciate you all having me on. I'm just a guy who talks on the radio. Honestly, I don't. There are a lot bigger people you can talk to than me. So thanks for spending some time and letting me run off at the mouth like you did.
Well, my fantasy football information is just like my golf game. It's all about gripping it and ripping it. We'll see you next time.
Right on, brother. Thanks.